evening and welcome back to Our Community, Your Voice. I'm so excited. I know you see me on a couple of different other shows, but this is one of my favorite shows. We get to highlight some people in our community, people that are doing great, good work for our community. But this evening I want to introduce somebody that you will recognize as we focus the camera on her. I want to welcome back Tricia Cunningham to the show. Yes, Tricia. Remember those days?
I know. We go way back.
We go way back.
Matters.
We go way back with Mystic Matters.
Oh my gosh, probably like 8 or 9 years we co-hosted that together.
For a long time. And so Tricia was the president of the Greater Mystic Chamber of Commerce for years and years and years. So when she came back, when I asked her to come back on to do this show with me, it's sort of like, okay, it's pretty easy.
Sure thing.
Yeah, sure thing. So this evening we also like to highlight this evening, a great show. But we have a special guest with us this evening, and I want to welcome to the stage and to the studio our state senator for the 18th District, State Senator Heather Summers. So welcome.
Welcome, thank you. This is great. I feel like I'm
well, we felt like
coming on
your
I don't know, your anniversary show. And Mystic still does matter.
Like a reunion.
Like a reunion
show.
Sort of like
the Friends and Cheers reunion. So thank you for having me. This is great. And I want to make sure everyone knows that Mystic still does matter.
It does.
And it matters a lot to the state and to me as the senator. And I'm excited to be here tonight.
So I want to open up a little bit with a little background history and tell us exactly the towns that you represented. You are in the 18th district.
Right, so the 18th district is a very large geographical district. I think I'm one of the senators that has the furthest distance to drive. So I have Groton, Griswold, North Stonington, Stonington, Sterling, Preston, and Plainfield. So sometimes it takes nearly an hour to get from one end of the district to the other. So I warn everybody, sometimes when we have different events, one on top of the other, it takes a little time to get there.
Yeah, the geographic area is
it's
quite
very large.
It
is large. So, but it's a wonderful district. I am so humbled and proud to be able to represent the people of the 18th district. I've gotten to meet over the last 2 years some just absolutely wonderful people doing terrific things for the state and for their communities, and it's been a true honor to really get close to some of the individuals, and I hope I can continue.
Well, and so how did you really get your start in going down this road and landing you here as a state senator?
Well, I first ran for office, I think it was actually 2001 in Groton, because I saw the punitive nature of the property tax taxing my parents' friends out of their homes. And I wanted to get involved and I wanted to change that. So I ran for council, and I always tell everyone every vote counts because I lost by 3 votes that year. And then I ran in the next term in 2003, and I was successful and continued on until 2009, I believe. Then I left and I got married and moved to New London, and then came back and was the mayor of Groton. So it's been a really interesting time. I love Groton. It's so complex, and when you talk to people about the different parts of Groton, that Mystic is actually part of Groton and part of Stonington, they actually don't believe that it spans between 2 towns.
I know. It's kind of like the Mystic and the Groton side, which part of Stonington and Groton do you live on? Yeah.
And just, the different communities and the different folks that you get to meet. I love Groton because it's such a diverse community. And so learning there was great training, because one of the things I found so valuable in Hartford is having that detailed municipal experience of being able to go through municipal budgets, understanding intimately what the needs are at the municipal level, so that when you make changes or laws in Hartford, you understand how it affects locally.
Back at home.
Right. And that is something that is very much missed on many of the legislators that are, up in Hartford, because they have not had that experience. And I can't tell you how invaluable that experience is. I think everybody should have that experience when they go to Hartford.
And up at Hartford, you're involved with a lot of committees. So you're using that experience.
Right, that training and it tells a little bit about some of the committees that you sit on, which I think is every single one.
It feels like every single one.
Doing a little background check on Heather, I was like, okay.
We are a part-time legislature, but my husband will tell you, I don't think he sees me from January until May. He actually bought me a couch so I can sleep in my office, and it's very time consuming, but I do love being able to move the needle in the right direction for the people of Connecticut. So it really became baptism under fire. I remember saying to the leader, I've had this experience, I can do this. I want really hefty committees. I don't want to be on committees that meet once every 6 months. And boy, I really was able to get probably more than I thought. So I am the co-chair of public health, which is a huge committee, which is in charge of veterans. It's in charge of things like the coroner's office, DEMIS, which is the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. It also ranges for public health. So there's so many different areas of public health. And to give you an example, in screening, we had over 500 bills that we have to go through to screen to see what we're going to hear and what we're not going to hear. Then I have the pleasure of being the vice chair of environment. I am the vice chair of education, the vice chair of higher education, and I sit on appropriations, which is very, very time consuming.
Right.
And then there's also different caucuses that I'm a member of. Tourism, the rural caucus. I have a lot of rural towns. We also have, there's a biotech caucus, there's an opiate caucus, and each one of these committees has subcommittees. So it is very time consuming. And even though it's a part-time legislature, it's really a full-time job.
Yeah, it's very much a full-time job.
Yes.
The one you just mentioned was the opioid
The
opioid
opioid crisis.
caucus,
Yeah.
which leads me
Let's
to
talk
the
about
opioid crisis.
Yes.
You're right.
So, and tell us a little bit about your involvement.
Sure. When I first was elected to office, one of my goals or one of my focuses really is this opiate epidemic that we are facing, not only in Connecticut, but across our country. And we are losing an entire generation of young folks and younger people to this epidemic. And we set up a task force within public health, and one of the things I think is so important that I brought to my committees was, instead of having these subcommittees made up of legislators, let's bring in the experts that are actually doing the job. So let's bring in law enforcement, let's bring in the hospital association, let's bring in the pain management doctors, let's bring in the mental health clinicians, so that together we all have input
And information.
because
Right, going forward,
so
sure.
many bills, as we have seen, from my experience being on the municipal level, are crafted in a vacuum. They're crafted under the Gold Dome of Hartford without having the input from, survivors that have been through addiction, or loved ones who have tried to get their loved ones help for addiction. So we were able to create a bipartisan task force. We actually had our local Groton Police Department. We had Detective Jenkins work on that for us. He was great because he could bring the committee Narcan, for example, and show us how it's delivered, how the old formula was so difficult to use versus the new device that they have now for Narcan.
And how it's administered, too.
How do you administer it, what it looks like, rather than just imagining what it's like. And out of that group, we were able to craft really historic opiate legislation in the state of Connecticut that passed unanimously out of both houses. That's one thing I'm very proud of. I had the first Senate bill passed out of both houses.
That's huge,
And,
because not only is it affecting your municipalities, your towns, and people in the state, but this is an effect that's nationwide.
Absolutely.
So you're at the front of this for the state of Connecticut, and we thank you very much for that.
Thank you. And the legislation was really groundbreaking. It was on the forefront of what other states are doing, and there's still more to do. One of the things that I'm very cognizant of is reviewing legislation that has passed. Once we've passed this bill, I like to go back, it's for my training in biotech, and review how this has been implemented. Is it working? What's not working? Are there tweaks that we need to make? I already have found.
Is it still making an impact?
Right, and is it effective? And when I have seen too many legislators say, okay, yeah, we did that, let's move on to the next thing. But we need to go back and review to make sure that it actually is working. And I've already found certain things that have created an issue that we didn't think about in that committee, and I'd like to go back and fix that in the next session. But things like that came out of that committee were the ability now for a person who is suffering from addiction that goes to the hospital and says to the doctor, I'm suffering from addiction, and the doctor makes the determination that this person needs to be in the hospital for treatment, this bill allows the doctor to make the call how long the patient stays, not the insurance company. That was a huge thing for us because
So the insurance company is not driving it.
Right, because the original insurance model was based on alcoholism, which is not opiate addiction. So, and many people don't have to be hospitalized, but little things like that make a very big difference for the person who's suffering from addiction, for the clinician who's trying to treat it. There's many more things that were in that bill, a mandate to have all scripts electronically written. We had to get the federal government to change the DEA laws on that because before everything had to be written by hand, which seems counterintuitive because you couldn't keep track of who was getting their prescriptions filled when it was by hand. So a simple fix like that, which was not simple because the DEA had to change their laws so that we could mandate that it's electronically written. So now our pharmacies can keep track of the prescriptions.
Right, and have a better handle on it.
Absolutely.
And this is to the point of what you were saying in your training, is going back and reviewing these things and looking at them and seeing where they need to make change and how can we do that, and bringing the people in that can help us with it. So it's looking at each and every one of these situations from your point of view, and bringing them forward. And you did a great job.
Thank you.
So on the opioid crisis, and let's talk a little bit about some of the issues that you've had to face and help out with the mental.
Sure. The mental health. Well, I am somebody who has been an advocate for those suffering from mental health issues. I think that there's a stigma associated with it. There shouldn't be. There's not one person that I have ever met who has not been touched in some way, whether it's a family member of themselves personally, with mental health. And mental health goes hand in hand with the comorbidities of addiction. And I've done a lot of work with our Whiting Forensic Hospital here in Connecticut, which is a facility that houses those who have been found not guilty because of insanity, and also houses those that are extremely compromised with mental health issues. There was a clear indication of abuse that was going on in this hospital. I was the only senator on both sides to stand up within 24 hours of learning about the abuse that could not be denied because it was on video, demanded a public hearing, and brought the structure of Whiting Forensic to its knees so that it is now reinstituted as a standalone hospital. It is licensed. It was not a licensed facility before. And by doing that, we were able to save $53 million of Medicaid dollars that were at risk. And we have a new director who I think is fantastic. He comes from another state. He has experience, and he said to me, quite frankly, what he saw was one of the most horrific forms of abuse he has seen in a 40-year career. So I'm very proud of standing up and challenging the status quo, bringing those who should be held accountable to be held accountable. I still feel that this goes all the way to the top, that if you are a commissioner or you're in charge of this facility, you are responsible for the behavior that goes on in it. And I'm glad to see that we have made major changes, and that hospital is now on a standalone. There was nothing more. I said, it was a lot of hard work, and it was very unpleasant at times to go through what has happened there. But to have a state rep from the other aisle stand up in this last session and say, this is the most important piece of legislation that we can pass this session, really makes you feel like you're doing the right thing.
And you really used your voice to speak for those who couldn't speak for themselves.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what we are counting on our legislators in the Capitol to do that for us.
Right. I have a true affinity to speak for those who are the most vulnerable. And one of the things that we saw even in the budget that was handed down from the governor, I looked specifically at those who are most vulnerable, things like the rape crisis centers, mental health and addiction grants, day services for the IDD community. Those were all zeroed out in the Republican and the Democratic budget. And it's counterintuitive to what everyone thinks about when they think of a Republican senator. But I made sure that everything was added back in for those in those particular categories and more, because that is what government is supposed to do, care for those who are the most vulnerable. That's our responsibility.
It wasn't really about a Republican and Democrat.
No,
it was really
but you
about
hear
what was
about,
right.
this, that,
it was
and the other
about
thing.
right.
It was about what's right, and I have actually been overwhelmed and honored with, awards from the IDD community. I fought with my leader to make sure that there was funding available so that they can have the proper housing and choice of housing on how they want to live and where they want to live. We were able to, at the last minute, help in the negotiations of the workers that are working with the IDD communities. Many people did not realize that folks that are suffering from an intellectual disability will go to work at, I'm going to just use Walmart as an example, to Walmart, and they have somebody who shadows them. The person shadowing them was making less than the person in the IDD community from Walmart. They hadn't had a raise since 2004. And this is hard work, and these people are so dedicated, and they form these lasting relationships with those who are suffering from an intellectual disability. It was the right thing for us to do to make sure that their wages came up to a
Right, and I just want to
spot.
thank the senator. I sit on a board for Horizons up in Wyndham, and we had her up there visiting this past summer, and that was a huge difference, Heather, that you
Thank you.
made for our Camp Horizons. I wanted to, it's a
Camp
great
Horizons
board.
is great.
It was a
Yeah.
really quick turnaround in the session, and Heather she picked up on it and said, no, this is the way it's got to go. And within, I don't know, an hour or so, we were told that we were awarded. These people were able to make more money, and so I want to thank you from Camp Horizons. And
Well, I want to thank all the people that spend their time and do this work, because it is God's work, and they are very, very special. And I wish we could do more, but at least they're at a spot now where they, are at a level that they should be, because, when we learned about that, that was something that really wasn't widely known, and it was the morning we were voting on this bill. I was in the car talking to people from the ARC, talking to Susette, and I said, okay, as soon as I get there, I'm telling you, we're going to do this. We're going to do it.
Okay. I just want to
So up to the last minute.
up to the last minute, and I do want to say this, that Heather is very approachable. And is really a state senator that is working for you, because this literally was in a 5-minute period of time. I got the call. I texted her, called her. She texted me back. Okay, and it literally was done within an hour. She says, "Okay, it's a go," and it was amazing how this was all done. And so, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
I want to move it. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say a similar example of being so approachable. I had brought up to you the prospect of the gun range going up in the quiet corner, and hadn't heard you talking about that really before I had asked you about it. I know you were working on it and you heard of what was going on, but then suddenly you were all over it and kind of getting all the information, and definitely in regular communication with everybody involved. So
that
give us
was
the update on that.
Yep, that's a battle that's still continuing, but that, I remember we talked a few years ago about that, and before I ran for office, it was something that I was, became interested in, because I saw, the Patchogue Forest is, if you haven't been there, you should go there. It's a beautiful.
It's beautiful.
It's the largest forest. It's the first forest that we have here in Connecticut. By the way, Connecticut was the first state to have an official forester, and it is just a different world. It's peaceful. It's serene. It's really an oasis of going someplace that we don't really have very much of that any longer. There's no cell phones, there's no beeping, it's just wonderful. And it is used by so many people, whether it's the Boy Scouts or, there's actually people that hunt there. There are horseback riding trails. And I had learned that the governor wanted to put a state gun range. I say in the center. He says it's only surrounded on 3 sides, but for me, it's in the middle of the state forest. And as we learned more, there was a group, St. Patchogue Forest, Keep Griswold Quiet, that was fighting this. I got involved with them and have been working on it through legislation. One of the things that I found, again, as a senator, that this town had, the towns up north had not really had the proper representation, in the fact that they were never allowed to have a true public hearing in Hartford concerning this. They had town meetings, but they are allowed to have, and they should have their voices heard. So I demanded a public hearing. I put in bills concerning the gun range. They had their turn in Hartford. They came. Their voices were heard. Unfortunately, they were put last on the agenda, so I had about 150 people. They came by bus. They had to wait for 17 hours to be heard, but they were heard. We are continuing to fight this process. I believe a state senator's job is to represent the district. The towns do not want it overwhelmingly. They have voted on that. And I will say that it gave me a really interesting insight into how government can and cannot work. And quite frankly, what we saw was this really, for me, an unethical situation between someone who is a state employee who works for the governor, selling a piece of property, the state paying 5 times the assessed value of that property to put a gun range in a town that doesn't want it. So that really struck with me. And what I did is put an amendment in environment, because everybody in environment is supposed to be, protecting the environment. And it said, if the gun range, if this property is sold, this property is immediately transferred to the DEEP to add to the state forest rather than for gun range. That passed unanimously out of environment, with one Senator Flexer voting against that after she wasn't at the meeting. And so it was going to be heard. When the bill went to be heard, the majority party split it off. So it was this standalone little bill, and I wasn't getting it called. And one of the things about bills is you have to get them called on the agenda. So at that point, I said, okay, I'm going to put an ethics amendment on every single one of the bills that's on the agenda on the other side, which basically said if you're a state employee and you're selling something to the state, it has to go through an ethics review. And I put it on a bill that they wanted to hear. They decided to not call it, so I put it on 21 bills. Every one of those bills got pulled off the agenda.
Isn't that a sort of an accountability issue too? I mean, if you're talking about an ethics.
And so the idea that all these bills were pulled off the agenda meant to me that they really didn't want to have an ethics conversation about what was going on. And I saw an ability within the Senate for me to rally my senators. Every senator in my caucus voted with the people of Griswold.
Yeah.
And every senator in the other caucus voted against them. So I think it's a wonderful position to be in. I'm one of 2 females in the Senate on my side, and having the ability to get them on board is something that I cherish, and I hope I can use for the betterment going forward. So it's been a really, really great 2 years. Interesting. I've learned a lot, and hopefully that people that are watching feel comfortable reaching out to me. I always call you back or email you back. It may take me a day or 2, but I am always willing to listen.
And I've witnessed that. I witnessed that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, because it is all about Mystic, but not really about Mystic, but not all about Mystic. But Heather's been a great friend, and there's this one story that you have to hear about our own VFW in Mystic. Please share that story with us, because this is just a heartwarming story. It's a little piece in Mystic, Connecticut, but it really makes a very big difference.
But a tremendous source of pride for
absolutely. I think that's what it is. You said it. A tremendous source of pride.
It's an important piece of
for
our
our
culture.
veterans, and of course this VFW is right on Route 1 in Mystic.
Absolutely. So when I first took office, we received a call from a gentleman at the VFW Mystic saying, can you please help us? We've been trying to get help for, I think he said about 7 years. We have a tax.
I think it was more like 10.
It was quite some time, I'll put it that way. So,
and we had representation.
Yes, but he just wasn't getting anywhere. Nobody was really willing to help. And one of the things that I found as a senator is that there are these items that people ask you for help for, whether it be I can't get through for my SNAP benefits, or I can't get through for DSS to help get services for my my child who needs them, or I'm not sure where to talk to with this situation. And I have to say, I have a wonderful aide. He's from Griswold, and we've made it our mission to make sure the little things are taken care of. So the VFW called. They hadn't had any help in restoring this confusing tax issue. And really what happened was, these poor guys are at the VFW, and they were not, or their bookkeeper was not allocating the tax properly on the chips and the pretzels that they sell in the canteen. So time had gone by, then there was a fine on top of a fine.
Right, we're talking about the sales tax,
this huge tax bill for this little VFW. Most of it was fines and penalties. And, they were struggling to pay it. They were like, it was significant. And so within literally 24 hours, 48 hours, we had made a call to the DRS. I said, look, these guys are veterans. They go to, to the south in the winter, and we were able to negotiate it way down. They were able to pay it. I think we got it down to 1/6 the original price.
Yes, you did.
They paid it, and they're still here. Right. And it's those little things that can make such a big difference for people in town. And those are the things that you forget about. But we've done so many of those little things, and I'm just really happy for them. Veterans are very important to me. One of the things that I was able to do is, if you look at the budget, it's a little confusing because it looks like there was a reduction of $2 million for the Veterans Hospital. But what we were able to find is that the Veterans Hospital is considered a critical care facility and has certain staffing levels, but it's not a critical care facility any longer. So therefore, the staffing levels could be reallocated properly to what it is, which is a long-term care facility. And we were able to take that $2 million and reallocate it and dedicate it for improvements and renovations at the Veterans Hospital in Rocky Hill. And, I visited with the commissioner. I just received a VA award in West Haven last week, and that makes this job all worth it.
Well, I want to get back to the awards just a little bit because she's sliding those in there. But I have to tell you, the senator has received like 8 awards. And
it's been a lot.
It's been a lot.
I'm shocked, actually.
But to be recognized, Heather, and thank you very much. You've done a great job in the last couple of years for us. But I do want to tap in just a little bit about our education funding for the town of Stonington and what you've just done, because that's huge. As we talk, because we talked a little bit about mental health, the opioid crisis, some of the little things that she's doing, and her approachability, but the education fund. Let's just talk about that a little bit.
So education is, again, very important. As a mayor, I saw the education budgets. I saw the money that was supposed to come into the state, because the state really has an obligation to educate all its children. In Groton, we were looking at, out of a $25 million dollar amount that used to come from the state, Groton was facing, under the governor's budget, an $18 million reduction. That was something that, we would have, I actually remember saying, okay, well, then we're going to send all our kids to New London because we're not going to have a school district here. So as the vice chair of education, we got together, we developed what I consider right now a very fair and equitable education cost sharing formula, which accounts for the wealth of the community based on free and reduced lunch, if you're in English as a second language, how much the community is in a wealthy versus socioeconomically depressed area. It counts whether you're the top 30 socioeconomically depressed towns, on and on and on. But it goes through, and it is fair, and every child has a base amount that is given to them. Stonington saw a significant increase under the original Republican education cost sharing formula. This year, the money was restored. I think the governor zeroed out Stonington completely.
Completely.
We got it restored under their budget that was passed. Unfortunately, the governor had clawback ability. He went in and clawed some money back from Stonington.
But still.
But you had it in there under our budget. Yeah. I will just say one thing. In the last budget, we had language in the budget that prohibited the governor from being able to go back and claw back money from municipalities, especially for education or municipal cost sharing. It was specifically written in the budget. He vetoed that, of course. We wanted to go back in and override that veto. Of course, my party wanted to override it. The other side did not. So right now, the governor still has that clawback ability. That's something that has to change because he can pick and choose who the winners are and who the losers are.
So we only have a few minutes to wrap it up, but could have gone on for another half an hour talking about some of the great things. Good luck to you on the Senate race. You're doing a great job for us.
When's the election
Tuesday,
day?
November 6th.
So everybody get out there and vote. And thank you, Heather,
for doing a great job. Thank you for having me. This has been a wonderful visit. Thank you to Tricia, and thank you to Susette. And I hope we can do another reunion. Mystic Matters.
That'd be great. It really will be great. So our community, your voice, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you very much, Frank and Frank. We'll see you the next time.
Thank you.